Thank you all for coming. And I'm pretty excited to chat with you guys about some of the benefits of this very particular program called ProLon. There is some pamphlets and information on your chairs that you're welcome to take with you, but tonight we're going to go through, first of all, what fasting is. I don't know, let me see a show of hands. Anybody here who's attempted a fast of any type at any point in their life? So quite a few people. And one of the things we're going to be talking about is that fasting is becoming a in vogue term. Many people have heard of intermittent fasting or IF, and there's a lot of talk right now about fasting in a lot of different forms. So we're going to start just talking about what is fasting, what are the different types of fasting, so that you guys have an understanding of the lay of the land. And then we're going to delve into what a fasting mimicking diet, specifically the ProLon program, is all about. I will have plenty of time at the end for questions, so if you want to just keep your questions till the end, and then we can have, any question and answers you guys might have. Oh, I didn't introduce myself. If you don't know me, I'm Dr. Kristen Coles. I'm a naturopathic physician. I'm also a licensed acupuncturist, and I practice upstairs at Steelsmith Natural Health Center. And Dr. Steelsmith, who I'm sure many of you know, might be popping her head in at some point as well. And I think if you're not a patient at the clinic, I recognize a lot of faces. You're welcome to sign in or introduce yourself after, and welcome. So when we're talking about fasting in general, there tends to be a reason or multiple reasons that people might decide that they want to do fasting. Now, there are religious reasons that people might fast, and that it has a long history, actually. And then, sort of in this day and age, there's other things that people really think about when they think about fasting. Maybe they want to lose weight. Maybe they want to change their body fat percentage. Maybe they want to change their waistline. Then we have things like their blood test results, energy, things like blood pressure, things like chronic diseases like cancer. A lot of cancer patients come in and ask me about fasting and is it good and should they be doing it? And lots of questions come up. Autoimmune disease, bowel disorders where people have a lot of issues with their gut. So there's a lot of different reasons that patients may decide that they want to investigate or think about fasting. What is fasting? In general, fasting is an abstaining from food or beverages. True fasting is the period that's necessary to convert from a sugar-burning mode to a fat-burning mode. And that's actually a really important distinction, and we'll be coming back to that as we go through some of these things. So that's what fasting in general is. There are things like biological fasting, and that's where we're actually putting the system into a cellular state of fasting. What happens particularly is that we don't consume foods that trigger these cellular food sensing pathways. You don't really need to know this. It's a little scientific, but there are very specific pathways that we can monitor cellularly, and we can actually even monitor on your blood works the marker called IGF-1. You're probably going to be hearing about that a lot in the future because we can actually measure that now in patients, and we can actually get a sense as to cellular aging from this type of marker. So you might hear a little bit more about that as the years go on. It's becoming a little bit more of a buzzword in the scientific circles. These sensing pathways, they will be triggered after 24 hours after the last meal. So biological fasting starts 24 hours after you've last eaten. Periods of food abstinence to keep you in a biological fasting state need to last 2 or 3 days or more. So there's some misconceptions that people might have around the word fasting. One of those is that juice fasting is fasting because it doesn't contain solid food. Well, juice fasting is a misnomer. If you're eating juice or consuming juice, you're not truly fasting. You're actually taking something in that is considered a food or beverage other than water. Also, if we get into intermittent fasting is not true fasting. That's a misconception or a misnomer unless you're doing an intermittent fast that lasts longer than 24 hours. So most patients come in and they tell me they're doing intermittent fasting. When I ask, oh, what do you do for your diet and what are you doing? And they say, oh, I'm doing intermittent fasting. And so I inquire more about that, and they say, oh, I don't eat from 8 p.m. until noon the next day. That's actually that actually has a different term, and we'll come to it in a minute. That's called a time-restricted eating. It's not truly intermittent fasting, because intermittent fasting would actually be going for longer than 24 hours at a time. One of the things that we're going to get into in more detail is that the ProLon fasting mimicking diet is specifically designed to be a 5-day fast. And that 5 days is very crucial because you want to surpass that 2 to 3 day mark so that you truly enter a biological fasting state. The benefits of fasting for your body are going to be met when you reach that 2 to 3 day mark. Hence why water fasting, to get a true water fast past a 3 day mark, is incredibly difficult. I don't know if anybody has ever tried a true water fast. Okay, a few brave souls. I had to do a true water fast when I was in medical school because naturopathic medical school is a little different. They make you do everything. You have to try it all out. And I had to do a 3 day water fast while going to class, taking exams, doing my clinicals. I mean, it was, I would say, not safe, honestly. I was not a fan, and hence, moving forward in my life as a clinician, I can count on one hand the number of times I have ever prescribed an actual water fast. Very, very, very rarely. Simply because it's extremely difficult to do. You cannot live your life. You literally are sofa bound, and your brain isn't working, and you really feel like crap, excuse my language, but you don't feel well. So yes, you might achieve that biological fasting state, but at what cost? And that's what we're going to get into a little bit later as well. So again, here we have the types of fasting that I just mentioned. Time-restricted eating. This is more what people who come in tend to think they're calling intermittent fasting, but this is actually the daily pattern of eating during a window of 8 to 12 hours. With time-restricted eating, you're not necessarily changing the number of calories, you're just restricting the time that you're eating. So you're kind of consolidating the amount of time that you eat. Whereas intermittent fasting, truly, when you're talking about the actual definition, is 1 to 3 days of fasting, usually not in a row. So people might eat normally a regular meal schedule Monday through Friday, and then they might fast on a Saturday for 24 hours, and then maybe they have one other day during the week. So intermittent fasting, it's a little bit different than what people are kind of referring to in intermittent fasting. Then we have prolonged fasting. That's where we hit the 4 or more consecutive days of fasting. That's where we're going to spend a bulk of our time talking about the health benefits, because the ProLon fast is a prolonged fast at 5 days. There's water-only fasts, which we just spoke about, and then there's the fasting mimicking diet, or FMD. The fasting mimicking diet is what ProLon has been designed to do, which is a program where you are eating small meals and snacks throughout the day for 5 days. The interesting thing is that the composition of what you're eating and what you're taking in is not enough to actually register as food intake, and you get into a biological and a cellular state of fasting that starts around that 3rd day and continues through day 4 and through day 5. It's very fascinating. It's been researched now for over 10 years. It was developed out of USC, the University of Southern California. There is a doctor there who has devoted his life's work to understanding and developing something like the fasting mimicking diet so that the benefits of fasting can actually be achievable for all of us in this room. As I stated earlier, water-only fasting is not that achievable for the majority of my patients and even for myself, to be honest. So what can fasting do? I touched upon this earlier. Fasting has been around for thousands of years, actually. It has an ancient evolution. Healing traditions for thousands of years have used it. We have many religious systems that talk about fasting and incorporate fasting in some of their programs. We know that it supports overall metabolic health. We know that it supports what's called cellular cleanup, and that leads to cellular regeneration and an increase in something called circulating stem cells. Who's heard of stem cells? A lot of people have heard of it. Okay, stem cells are fascinating. We are born with a certain amount of stem cells, and stem cells have an ability to become any cell in the body. They are these magical cells that have not been prescribed to a certain organ or a certain route. Children and babies and infants have a lot of stem cells because they are growing. How do we grow? We have to incorporate more cells, and that comes from stem cells, so we turn them into our liver as it grows. All of these organs contain certain stem cells. So stem cells are very regenerative. If we can turn on stem cells, we have the ability to regenerate even as we're aging. The unfortunate thing is that as we age, we lose our stem cells. Enter fasting mimicking diet, because one of the very fascinating things about this protocol is that we know, we've researched this, it increases your stem cell capabilities. So that becomes very important for chronic disease. It becomes important for brain health. There's a wealth of research happening right now on using this type of diet for Alzheimer's disease, to prevent dementia, to prevent this breakdown that we see in many different systems. So that increase in circulating stem cells is, in my opinion, as a science geek, one of the coolest things about this whole fasting protocol. It also impacts markers associated with an increase in human longevity and health span. So we are able to identify via research markers that we know we see in populations that are centurions, meaning people who have reached age 100. They have some interesting markers that show their ability to have a greater longevity. We see that with the fasting mimicking diet, these same cellular markers are increased after we do this fast. The word ProLon, it actually stands for prolonged longevity. So that's how he came across and gave it that name, because the doctor who's researching and promoting this and utilizing this has really seen that it has benefits in the longevity and the anti-aging sphere. So when I took the poll in the beginning, almost everybody in this room had heard of fasting or maybe attempted it or done something in the realm of fasting. And it's not surprising, because fasting is the #1 diet pattern in the United States in the year 2018, which is pretty interesting. Like I said, you're going to start hearing more and more about fasting, whether people are throwing out the term intermittent fasting or the fasting mimicking diet. And you can see here, it just gives us a little bit of an idea of what's popular. And the #1 first thing up there is the intermittent fasting. So as I talked about, lots of people have heard of it. A little bit of a misnomer, because people think they're doing it. It's not exactly intermittent fasting. A lot of other diets you've probably heard of up there: paleo diet, a gluten-free diet, the keto diet, lots of different things, cleanses. But what's interesting is about 36% of people have followed a specific eating pattern in the past year. I like this slide. I hope you guys can see it okay. I know it's a little blurry, but I'm going to go through it. On the right hand, or your left hand side for the category, there's a few different things listed there. There's pure calorie restriction, meaning just reducing the number of calories someone eats in a day. There's intermittent fasting, which for this purpose includes going a 24-hour time frame, either once or twice a week, not consecutive, without eating. There's time-restricted feeding, which is where maybe you don't eat from 8 p.m. till 11 a.m. the next day. There's prolonged fasting, such as like a water fast. And then there's the fasting mimicking diet. Along the top, we have different markers: weight loss, lean body mass protection, cholesterol impact, fasting blood glucose, cellular cleaning and that increase in the circulating stem cells, and food intake. The comparison here, I think, is pretty interesting. If you look on the bottom row for the fasting mimicking diet, what we can see is that the fasting mimicking diet promotes weight loss. It also, while it's promoting that weight loss, it's preserving your lean body mass. If you can note, no other diet listed there has actually been shown to protect the lean body mass. So one of the risks that we run up against, and the research is kind of showing this is based on the research study, is that when you're doing time-restricted feeding or calorie restriction, you may not preserve your lean body mass. Now, what is lean body mass? That's your muscles. That's your bone health. And what we want to make sure is that if we are doing fasting on a regular basis, that we are doing what I talked about in the very first slide, which is actually changing from a sugar burning mode to a fat burning mode. If we don't access that fat burning mode, we are going to have lean body mass loss. We are going to start to potentially break down some muscles. So that's a really key, important difference to note here. All of these types of diets can impact your cholesterol, meaning they can lower your cholesterol. All of them can impact the blood glucose. The number of check marks just is kind of like a range. 3 check marks means it might have the most change on a blood glucose. Then we have the increase in your stem cells and the cellular cleaning. Again, I think it's really fascinating to note that the only things we see doing this via the research are the prolonged fasting, meaning you're reaching 4 days or longer, and the fasting mimicking diet. The next category is food. So can you eat food on this diet? And you can eat food on all of them except prolonged fasting, which is a water fast only. So if we think about water-only fasting, there are health benefits, which is why in the past, people have done this, practitioners have talked about doing this. It can stimulate weight loss, it can improve your metabolic health, it does support cellular cleaning, and it supports the stem cell priming. So it can get all of those benefits. But it does have some major disadvantages, and I alluded to that earlier. It's very difficult to do. It will not preserve lean body mass, so you will have some muscle breakdown and some tissue breakdown. You will be deprived of micro and macronutrients. So your vitamins, your minerals, you will not be getting those with water only. So you will actually be stealing those from your tissues, stealing them from your bones. That's not always a good thing. Also, there's a risk for gallstones. So anybody who's ever had a history of gallstone issues, water fasting is it can be a very dangerous thing to do because it can actually promote the acceleration of bile acid coming out of the gallbladder, and that can promote some gallstone issues. So what do we know about the fasting mimicking diet? As we saw earlier, it does tick all the important elements. It's plant-based, so everything in it is plant-based. There's no meat, there's no dairy, it's considered vegan. There's quite a lot of research on it. There are preclinical and clinical trials in humans. There are also clinical trials in mice. It's patented, and it's been published multiple times in many different journals. JAMA, which is very well known, the Journal of the American Medical Association. So there's quite a lot of research on this, and it's been in development for many, many years. So So let's talk about the 5 days that are included in the ProLon fasting mimicking diet. Day 1, we are going to try to enter the fasting state. It primes the body to transition to the fasting state. And day 1, you're actually going to be eating the most calories when you are doing this fast. Because as I said, you are eating small meals and you are eating snacks throughout the day. And day 1, you kind of have the most calories, so you are taking in calories. Day 2, you're starting to enter that fat burning, where we switch from being a sugar burner to being a fat burner. So that's that hallmark of getting into a fasting state. We do start some cellular recycling and some cellular cleanup. Sometimes people don't feel as great on day 2 because of this cellular recycling that's starting to happen. Then we have day 3. Day 3 is the true cellular cleaning day. That's when we're really starting to clean up the cells. Most people are going to enter ketosis. Ketosis is a state where you are burning fat. You are not burning or utilizing sugar anymore. Your brain is running on fat as a fuel. Your body is running on fat as a fuel. Day 4, we start to have that cellular regeneration. We still are doing cellular cleaning, and then we're enhancing that stem cell production. So that stem cell production that excites me starts on day 4. And then day 5 is your final day, and we have the regeneration that begins. So we're promoting the repair by increasing the circulating stem cells. So each day has its very specific goals, and the meals that you're eating are designed specifically for each of these goals to walk you through. I'm just going to show you guys. This is the ProLon kit. So 5 days comes in a box. Everything you need is in this box. And if you can see, and I'll have this up, you can look at it later, there's little boxes inside here that have numbers on them. This is day 1. And everything you eat and everything you drink other than water is in this little bitty box. And every day has its box. I will say that you need to be on board with soup because the meals are soup. And the soups have to be constituted with hot water. So I know in the summertime here and in the hot weather, sometimes soup is not sounding very appetizing to a lot of people. But that is what the program is. I call them space soup because it's like astronaut food. It's kind of like freeze-dried. Oh, this is a butternut squash. Oh, okay. Fun. So there's 2 different flavor kits you can get. This is the kit number 2. So we have a minestrone blend, and you have a butternut squash soup, and then you have some things in here like kale crackers. One of my patients who did it was she told me afterwards, she said, on day 1, I hated the kale crackers. I didn't even finish them. Well, the kale crackers reappear on day 4 or day 3, and she was like, but when I got to day 3 or day 4, they were the best tasting crackers I've ever had. She was like, in fact, I might even order some. They were delicious. I was like, yes, well, that's what happens when you restrict what you're eating in a day. The other thing that you kind of have to like is olives. So if you hate olives, that's, one thing that you may or may not be into with this, but maybe by day 3 you'll love olives. I don't know, But the olives are included because olives have a very specific fat composition, so they're very healthy fat, and so they are included in multiple days on the diet. And frankly, I love the olives, and these olives I thought were delicious, but, some people really don't like olives. And then there's all kinds of things like teas, and you have some bars that you eat on day 1. So there's nut-based, and there's the space soups, and there's some kale crackers. And if you're curious about ingredients, there are ingredients listed. If you have certain dietary restrictions or things like that, you can find all the ingredients. The great thing about this is that there are no gums included. There are prebiotic type foods in here, so they're going to have some interesting effects in your gut, which we'll get to in a minute. but I just wanted to kind of show you guys the kit just so you know what I'm talking about. Day 6, it's not up here, but day 6 is a transition day off the diet. So there is a special protocol that you also do on day 6. It's not included in the box because you do it on your own. But once you've been in a fasting state for 5 days, you want to gently come off of it. So day 6 is like you're transitioning back into some regular food. You're doing light bone broth or soups or roasted vegetables, maybe some light fish if you do meat protein. And then by day 7, you can go straight back to a regular diet, whatever that might be for you. So it's fairly doable. It's fairly short. You are eating, and you do feel like you are eating while you're going through it. All right, I want to get into some details of the benefits and exactly what we're seeing with this. So this is a really interesting slide, and this is about weight loss because a number of patients and people do think about using ProLon to specifically work on weight loss. Sometimes a special type of fat around the abdominal area called visceral fat becomes very, very difficult for people to get rid of no matter what they're doing, no matter what type of diet, no matter what type of exercise they're doing. And this type of fat is known for its sort of impact to your health because it's very inflammatory. This type of fat has a potential to create a lot of inflammation in the system, and that's why it is so dangerous when we talk about abdominal obesity or abdominal fat. So this is an imaging of visceral fat, meaning abdominal fat, before ProLon, and then the amount of visceral fat after ProLon. Now this is not after just one cycle. ProLon is designed in patients who have specific weight loss goals to be done 3 months in a row, 5 days out of each month. So this research here is based on a 3-month protocol. We also know from the research that the fasting mimicking diet can help individuals with a normal BMI, meaning individuals who are not overweight or obese, and they can lose an average of 5.2 pounds of fat specifically and 1.2 inches off a waist circumference. In overweight or obese individuals, they can lose greater than 8 pounds, and that's mostly seen in the visceral fat loss. And it will protect lean body mass. So that's very, very interesting. We also know that the fasting mimicking diet results in a 3% reduction in body weight that remains that way even after people go back to their regular diet and back to their regular lives. So it's not a yo-yo type diet where many times people might tell me, oh, when I was in my 20s, I literally could just not eat for a few days and then I'd lose all my weight. But now when I do it, it all just comes back, right? So they're in this yo-yo situation. This isn't quite a yo-yo situation. This tends to have benefits that will last as long as you're doing the appropriate number of cycles. Yeah. What else does it do? We touched on this. It promotes cellular cleaning. It reduces body weight and fat. And it decreases that hormone, the IGF-1, which has been shown, if it's elevated, to implicated to increase aging, and it can be a marker of a disease state. So Dr. Walter Longo, who is the head researcher behind this, he has done a majority of his studies measuring IGF-1 blood markers on patients before and after they're doing it, and finding that some of these markers will drop upwards of 100 points, which is pretty fantastic. When you think about IGF-1, if your levels are greater than 220, that indicates an accelerated cellular aging. We want levels to be in the lower hundreds, and they will see a significant difference after just the cycles of fasting mimicking diet. That's why they say it has a longevity effect. What else does the research show? It can give rejuvenation, wellness, and health optimization. It's clinically studied to promote health span and longevity. There is a weight management effect. It's a fast way to lose weight. Most of it comes from the visceral abdominal fat. It preserves your lean body mass, your muscles, and your bones. This graph, you can see it. That line on the midline is 50%. That means 50% of participants. So over 50% of all participants of the fasting mimicking diet had weight loss, had a change in waist circumference, had a drop in their systolic blood pressure. Upwards of 80% of patients had a change in diastolic blood pressure. So there are some incredible benefits for using the fasting mimicking diet in people who have hypertension or high blood pressure issues. We have maybe 60% of patients had a significant change in cholesterol, and then specifically LDL, which LDL is one of our lipid markers. L stands for lousy. It's our bad cholesterol, so to speak, so we don't want really high levels of that. Also, we know that the results were maintained 3 months after the final third cycle of the fasting mimicking diet. So again, this is creating an altered cellular change that will have lasting benefits for the system. What else does the research tell us? Has anybody here heard of CRP, or C-reactive protein? A few people. C-reactive protein is a marker that I've probably run on many of you who've been my patients. It's a marker for something called inflammation. If you know anything about inflammation, inflammation is the root cause to almost every chronic disease that we know of. And we need a healthy level of inflammation, but many of us have too high levels of inflammation, and that can predispose us to autoimmune diseases, cancer, things that we don't want to develop. What's very cool is that the fasting mimicking diet will drop CRP levels, and it will drop it significantly, and those results will maintain. How does it do that? Part of it is that inflammatory visceral fat that we spoke about. That promotes inflammation. So if we can get rid of that fat that promotes inflammation, we can bring these markers down, and we can maintain that. So that's a very cool thing for me when I'm talking to my patients, is if I have patients who have CRP levels that just aren't really budging, that's a concern for me, and this is a great tool to work on bringing that down. What else do we know? It can maintain healthy levels of glucose. High levels of glucose is what causes prediabetes and diabetes. It can maintain healthy levels of cholesterol. As we saw in that slide, it can help maintain a healthy blood pressure level. And it can also help maintain healthy levels of triglycerides, which is another lipid marker. So something like a metabolic disease situation, metabolic syndrome, this can really make a difference for those individuals. It can also enhance your feeling of well-being. It can improve energy levels. It can allow patients to feel empowered in making healthier choices in their life. There's some interesting data that isn't on a chart here, but they found that about 60% of patients who did complete one round at least of the fasting mimicking diet felt that from that point on, they made healthier food choices. They were able to break that sugar craving situation where they were always maybe like feeling like they wanted to grab sugar, or they didn't have control over their cravings. A high number of patients after completing one cycle felt like it really helped them regain control over their life and their diet. So a little bit of a summary. After one fasting mimicking diet per month for 3 months in a row, we see particularly that glucose, insulin, and IGF-1 can be maintained in a healthy range. Cholesterol, lipid markers, and blood pressure can be maintained at healthy levels. C-reactive protein for inflammation can be maintained at healthy levels. Stem cells might have a boost in your stem cell capability. Your lean body mass is going to be maintained, and weight and abdominal fat will be reduced. So really a comprehensive way to change things in the system with, in my opinion, a fairly easy intervention when you think about just 5 days a month for 3 months in a row. All right, so I have done it myself. I've done 2 rounds. I started in August. I did my second one in September. I will most likely be doing my 3rd one in the coming weeks. And why did I do it? What were my goals? Well, I'm a little different because my goals are always to kind of be your guinea pig. I'm your lab rat. So I try everything on myself before I tell you guys to do it. And I've been looking at the research and hearing about this protocol for, I would say, about a year and a half. And I really just decided, okay, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to try it out. I want to see what it's all about. Do I want to have patients to do it? Because as I said earlier, I've maybe had patients do a water fast 3 times out of my entire thousands of patients in clinical career because it's really tough and it can be dangerous. Yet, as a clinician, I know the benefits of fasting and I would love to incorporate that for my patients. But, you know, I'm very safe. I want to do what's safe for my patients. I want to make sure that people feel good and it's doable. So, fasting mimicking diet. Was it doable? It was absolutely doable. The very first round, I decided to do it on the 5 days of my work week. So I work Tuesday through Saturday. I see patients 5 days a week. And I wanted to make sure that if I was having patients do it, that I could do it and I could work and I could do what I need to do. And it was achievable. I actually did not feel like I was fasting. I did not feel like I was not eating. And that was a really huge thing because, as I stated earlier, when I had done a fast in the past, it was awful and I couldn't function and my brain didn't work. And, you know, if I'm trying to sit there and interpret someone's lab test results, I really need my brain to be going. So that was a really great thing to see. My second time that I did it, it was so doable. I said, yep, you know what, I'm going to do it the same 5 days. I'm going to do it my work week days because that's easy for me. A few points that we didn't get into earlier in the lecture is that there is a digestive benefit to the fasting mimicking diet as well. One of the things that we were talking about is a cellular cleanup and cellular regeneration. That cellular cleanup is happening across the whole system. So it's happening in your gut and your digestive tract. There's amazing research on using this fasting mimicking diet protocol for patients with inflammatory bowel disease. These are autoimmune diseases like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. And what they're finding is they're actually able to take people out of that state and put them into remission using a fasting mimicking diet. So why and how does that happen? Well, your gut has cells that need to die off and they need to turn over, and we need to replace them with new cells. So that happens. But there's also something called a microbiome. Who's heard of a microbiome? Okay, yeah, a lot of us. Most of us have heard of this by now. Those are the bugs that live in your large intestine or your colon. And we can have a good healthy microbiome, or we can have a microbiome that is creating some toxins and making us not feel well. Personally, I don't really have any digestive complaints. My digestion works really well. I tend to feel fine digestively. But what was really interesting on the very first 5 days that I did is that after my lunchtime space soup, I would feel like gurgling and a little bit of gas production and a little bit of bloating. And it was mild, but it was different. Like, I don't usually get that. And I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Well, come to realize as I'm going through is that on day 6, I woke up and my stomach, my digestion was just flat. Like, there was no bloating, there was nothing happening. It was just so flat. And I realized, oh, maybe I've been living with a tiny bit of bloating that I didn't even know I had, because it was really minimal and it wasn't problematic. But sometimes you live with things and you don't even know that you had it until it's gone. Exactly. And I was like, oh my gosh. So what was the most interesting is that my second round, I didn't have any digestive symptoms. Nothing happened after lunchtime. I had no gas, no gurgling, no bloating, nothing. And the reason is that that first round was changing my microbiome in a slight way. It was improving it. And I didn't even know I would be getting that benefit. And then it maintained, it lasted, because a month later when I did my second, my microbiome didn't need to shift. It was already in a very healthy state. So that was very interesting. Mental effects. My brain was sharp. I was able to do what I needed to do. And then I did get, on day 6, the day after, I got this really interesting, like, euphoric boost. It was this combination of, I think, having the brain cleaned out, but also accomplishing something. And there's some psychology behind these types of programs as well, because when you go through something that you're a little bit like, oh my gosh, is this going to be hard? Am I going to be able to do it? How's it going to go? And then you get through it and you're like, oh, I did it. Like, I did 5 days. I only ate what was in the box, even when I had to go to Whole Foods and get my dogs their food because I was not thinking ahead and I had to walk through the grocery store on day 3. I did it, right? And you get this almost like euphoric boost of really accomplishing something, which I thought was very interesting. Next, sleep. This is not talked about in the research earlier, but there is some preliminary research on changing sleep patterns and sleep cycles when you do a fasting mimicking diet. In fact, it's been shown that doing these types of diets may improve your ability to get into what's called deep sleep. Deep sleep is the cycle of sleep that's the most restorative phase of sleep. We have light sleep, we have REM sleep, and then we have deep sleep. I track my sleep with this little ring. It's like my little biohacking device. And when I was on my 5 days of the fast, I started to notice differences. First of all, my resting heart rate at night dropped about 10 points. I'm usually resting heart rate at somewhere around the 52 at night. I was waking up and my resting heart rate average was in the 40s, which is very low. It's fine. I'm safe. All was well. But what it was telling me is that my body was cellularly going into this fasting state. I also found that prior to doing my first round of ProLon, my percentage of deep sleep every night was hovering somewhere maybe between a 15 to a 20%. Ideally, for brain health and regeneration, you want to be hitting that 20 to 25% at every night. Ever since I did my first round, I have been consistent around 20% of deep sleep every night. And that was very interesting to me, and it made me wonder, is there research on this? So then I started digging, and sure enough, there is research on fasting specifically helping with changing different types of your sleep. So that was really interesting. Cravings. As I stated earlier, this can help you break your cravings. And what I found is I eat a really healthy diet as doing what I do. I try to walk my talk and I eat well. But I did find that when I finished this, I was even more motivated to eat really well, to just really, I felt good and I wanted to maintain it and I felt accomplished, and that was a really cool thing to see. And a lot of patients who have done it thus far have told me it has really helped their cravings. It has really helped break through the sugar cravings or whatever the cravings they might be having. Brain health. I particularly wanted to try this not just to be your guinea pig, but because I want to maintain and preserve my brain health. And as I stated earlier, there's a lot of research on this in preventing Alzheimer's disease and dementia. One of the things that happens, even in the brain, and we didn't always know this, the brain has stem cells too. When we go into a fasting state, we actually allow the cells in the brain that are old or damaged or not working to be killed or to die off. That's not happening all the time. Most of the time in our life, we're not killing off those cells and replacing them with new ones. When you do this, we do. This book, this is the Longevity Diet book. I have a few copies of these, so if someone really would like a copy, I can lend out some copies. Just let me know. This is by Walter Longo, Dr. Walter Longo, and he is the researcher and the doctor who put together this entire protocol, there's an entire chapter in here on the research with Alzheimer's disease and the benefits. There's an entire chapter in here on the benefits for patients who have cancer, for patients who have autoimmune disease, for patients who have bowel disorders. So if there are specific disease conditions that you're curious about and you're curious about the research, this is a great book to check out. Weight loss. I didn't do this to lose weight. I'm okay with where my weight is, but I did experience weight loss. So I'm one of those normal BMI individuals who average maybe have 5.2 pounds of weight loss. I had about 3 pounds of weight loss. So nothing extreme. It was fine for my body type, but that did happen, and it was mostly on the abdominal area. So that was kind of fascinating for me to see. Let's see. All right, so I think that ends everything I want to say, but I do want to open it up to questions that you may have about anything I said, anything I missed, anything in particular. I also know there's any patients in here who did the protocol with me and want to talk about their experience at all?
I did it.
Do you want to share?
I'm happy to share.
Okay.
I don't know if there's questions that you have first.
Just tell us how it was. How many rounds have you done?
I've only done one so far. I plan on doing another one. Well, more than one.
Yeah.
But I thought it was easier than I thought, and I did it because I've tried everything in the past. In 5 days, I was like, I can do 5 days. I don't think I can do 7, but I can do 5. I felt really not hungry the entire time, but I think the key for me was that I really did drink water with it, and I think that helped a lot. I was surprised at how easy it was, and then...
Did you feel good after? Did you have any benefits?
So I lost weight, and I noticed, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together, but I'm like, oh, I think my skin actually looks better too, which I was really happy about. I was also surprised because I've done other like restricted diets in the past, and it seemed like my digestive system kind of stopped working a little bit, and so I was surprised with this one. I was like, not to get too far in the TMI track, but everything worked really well and seemed, so I felt like I was shedding stuff from the inside too.
Yeah. So what she's alluding to is that she was pooping every day. And that's a really good thing, and that's a really big key. And I forgot to mention that I was also shocked when I did it the first time that with such a small amount of food that I was still having my regular bowel movements. Because when you do water-only fasting, you stop pooping. And that makes you not feel so good. Yeah. But with this, everything was still moving smooth, and that's really good. Now, one of the things she also mentioned is that she drank a lot of water. And part of this protocol does have you drinking a lot of water. I noticed also that my skin felt really good. I noticed that my lips were really moisturized and hydrated and plump. And that's because you're drinking a lot of water. You have water with all your soups. You have teas every day you're drinking. You have a very special drink you make that you have to drink a whole thermos of throughout the day. So you are definitely required to drink plenty of water. Anything else you wanted to share?
I mixed the tea. I didn't do it hot in just like a cup of tea. I mixed it with my big water, so it made the water more interesting.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes?
Can you also, how's the exercising?
Yeah.
During the...
Good question. So when you are on a fasting protocol for those 5 days, you do not want to be doing extreme aerobic exercise. You're on very limited calorie intake, so you don't actually want to be burning excessive calories by exercising. You can walk, you can do very gentle exercises, but you shouldn't be entering into like high intensity interval trainings. If you're a CrossFitter, you shouldn't be doing major weights. You should be really doing very minimal in terms of the amount of burn.
Can you flavor the water with lemon?
Yes, you can. So what's really cool in the box is that there are a whole thing that tells you all the different things you can do. So you can add the teas to your water. You can add a little bit of lemon. Even to your soups, you can add some fresh herbs and some lemon. So like by day 4, I was kind of tired of my minestrone and quinoa soup, but it was food. But I put a little bit of chopped up mint in it one night and a little spritz of lemon. And so you can do some little things. So there are guidelines, and it's really self-explanatory, which I love, because you really can open up the box, you can look at all the little instruction sheets, and it will tell you what you need to do. If you, for instance, skip a meal, you shouldn't, but you can. You can not eat the olives if you want, but it is designed to sort of be inclusive, so that you should do the things that are in it. Yes?
Is there a difference in the effectiveness with a person's age?
Yes, that's a great question. So the question is there a difference in effectiveness of someone's age? I do not recommend anyone under the age of 18 to do it. And if someone is over the age of 70, I do recommend that it be medically recommended. However, there are a lot of patients who are over age 70 who have Alzheimer's or dementia who are doing the protocol. It's just simply that we would want to make sure that they aren't frail and very tiny, because that weight loss that they may incur might not be a good thing.
It seems like it's suggested it should be 3 months, that you do it for 3 months.
So if someone has some specific biomarkers that need to shift, like cholesterol, blood pressure, glucose, any of those things, then yes, we do want to repeat it for those 3 months. For me, I'm a person who didn't necessarily have to do it for 3 months in a row. Because of my age and because of my biomarkers and my goals, I could actually do it once a year and still get some benefits until I got to a point where I needed to do it more. Also, for some patients who are very concerned about weight loss, it can be done every 2 weeks. So it can be done more often if there's a specific issue with overweight or weight loss that needs to happen. It can be done more often. But generally speaking, the research shows that if you want to maximize the benefits with your stem cells and any of those other biomarkers, you want to do it for 3 months in a row.
And you're selling them at your practice?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you can buy them online, but we do sell them at the practice for a little bit cheaper than what you can get them online. And we can drop ship them to you. It's very easy. If you're interested, I think we have, because it's so big, and this is Hawaii, so we don't have a lot of space, so we really only have like a few kits in the office. But what's wonderful is the company will just drop ship it to you for free. So if you're interested, you can let us know, and we can help you place an order, and it can just be sent to you, or it can be sent to the clinic and you can pick it up. But we prefer the other option just for space.
How much are you selling?
They're $195.
Really? That's it? Sorry. Okay, you said that you recommend measuring the IGF-1. Do you recommend it to do it before and after just to see the stats? Or?
So if you're going to do lab work of any type, I do recommend, if you're curious about changing biomarkers, that you do get labs done before. And then after you complete the 3 cycles, about 5 to 8 days after that final cycle ends, you want to do your next set of labs. And that's where we will get to see the changes.
That's,
Yeah.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Is there a reason why you're not introducing this? Not anybody from 18 or below to be doing it?
Yes, so why wouldn't we want 18-year-olds or below to doing it? Well, you're still growing, and we don't want to kind of interfere with that process. Now, there might be case-by-case basis where there could be some biomarkers that are really concerning. Even in younger population, we do know that sometimes we have patients now who are having diabetes at a really young age and those kind of things. But generally, it's because the body is still developing and still growing, and it's not necessarily recommended. Yeah?
I ordered the book is available on Audible.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me, or Kindle, but I'm trying to remember now whether it didn't cost anything. It was something where it was basically ordered or...
Yeah, I think, so she's saying she might be able to get the book on Audible, and The books that I have in the office, I have a few of them, and they are free. So, I don't have enough for everybody, but you're welcome to let me know. There's no charge for the books from our office because we got them for free. So I think if you sign up online, you might be able to get the book on the website for something like $5.99. What's really interesting about this company, almost all the proceeds are going to research. Dr. Longo has made it his life's mission to try to change the health of the world, and he's not getting monetary benefits from this. They're really trying to just enhance and educate the world about the benefits. So it's pretty interesting. Yeah. So supplements and medications. I always recommend that you talk to your physician specifically, but medications generally would remain to be taken. Like if you're on a thyroid medication, you would continue to take your thyroid medication. Extra supplements, for the most part, are recommended by the company that you don't need to take. There are some supplements included in it. There's an algae oil capsule. There is a plant-based vitamin that's in there. Sometimes for some of my patients, I might shift and have them not take that and take something else that I'm giving them. So as with everything, I do recommend that you speak with your doctor for your specific case on how or what you might do with this, especially if you're on medications or if you're on a heavy list of supplements. Any other questions? Yeah?
Is there a reduction in chronic pain in this diet? Has that been noticed?
That's a great question. So he's wondering about chronic pain. What I would say is that if there's chronic pain that's associated with an inflammatory disease, like rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune, it can give improvements. Now, if we're talking about pain from osteoarthritis, I haven't seen data on that in terms of a specified research. But if you're reducing inflammation system-wide and your pain is a product or byproduct of inflammation, there should be a type of change that you might experience.
That's great.
Yep. Any other questions?
Just one last one.
Oh, sure, yes, of course.
You speak about cell cleanup. What does that mean?
So cell cleanup, so the scientific word is autophagy, which means you're killing off parts of the cell or cells themselves that are old or damaged. And as we go through life, we encounter things like radiation, and we encounter toxins, and we encounter viruses, and we encounter things that can damage our cells or damage the organelles in our cells. And our body needs to have a way to get rid of those cells and then to replace them. Now, children are very good at that because innately they have this great stem cell ability where they can call their stem cells and they can replace. As we age, we're not so good at that. And as we age, we've also found that we don't kill off or clean up our damaged cells or the sort of areas of our cells that are not doing so well. Hence why things like dementia or Alzheimer's disease, they talk about neurofibrillary tanglement, meaning there's all these dead tissue that's in your brain that's getting in the way of your neurons talking to each other. That's why when we clean that up, when we get rid of it, when we kill it off, when we process it, we can replace it with cells that work well. And that process happens all over the body. It happens in your liver. It happens in your gut. It happens in your skin. It happens in your brain. It happens in your retina. It happens in your spleen. It happens in your kidneys. It happens everywhere. And that's, for me, the coolest part about this is that there is a way that we can see via the research that we can actually enhance that cleanup, and then we can replace it with new cells. Yep. Yes?
As you were talking about older damaged cells, is that similar to like free radicals of what they're saying about the body, or is that different?
Free radicals are molecules that will do the damage.
Okay.
Okay, so free radicals are not your cells, but free radicals are things that can come into the body and create the damage. Yeah. Yeah.
You were, excuse me, you mentioned a while ago an age limit of a maximum of 70. Did you kind of fit, there are some of us in here that maybe over 70.
Yeah.
Maybe even over 80.
Yep. So the age 70 cutoff is a generalized cutoff that, because this company sells kits to the general public, they have to put some boundaries around it. Now, if you are under the care of a physician and there are some very specific things you're looking at achieving with it, it can be done. And like I said, there's a whole group of patients with Alzheimer's and dementia who are well above 70, who they are using this protocol with. We just would want to make sure that weight-wise, we're okay. We would want to be looking at biomarkers, and we would want to make sure that when you go into the refeeding time, that we're really getting adequate calories and you're going on a really good and healthy diet after you go through it. And we'd want to sort of monitor blood pressure and things like that and just make sure that that someone's feeling okay. Yes?
I just read here where it's saying to avoid alcohol, if that makes sense. There is actually explain at the end of that list it says more cold environments and swimming. So I'm living here where it's not so cold swimming like it was in Minnesota. So do you know why that they're saying to avoid swimming?
Yeah, so that's mostly saying you don't want to get really cold because your body's going to needs to burn more calories to create heat. So I would say in our water, gentle swimming is okay. Anything that's a gentle exercise that's not going to stress your system out is going to be an okay thing to do. It also says things like don't operate a motor vehicle. These are, again, boundaries that the company needs to say for the general public. I will say I didn't have any trouble operating a motor vehicle. Everything was fine. I don't really have a concern with that, but it is just alluding to the fact that if you are going on a restricted caloric intake, sometimes people can feel things different from their day-to-day life. So we want to be cognizant of that. Any other questions? All right. If you guys do have questions, feel free to reach us at the office. If you're curious about how this could be used in your own healthcare, just definitely talk to your physician. And thank you guys for coming out on a Friday night. I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys learned something interesting.